Alright guys, Wesley with Rudd Manufacturing here. And today I'm going to show you how to do injectors on an, I think this is going to apply from 03 to 06 Dodge Ram. I know definitely the 5.9 common rails. Specifically this is on the 04.5 and it should be good for sure on the 04.5 through 06, I believe. Probably 07, but I'm going to say 04.5 to 07 just to be safe. They might have done some stuff that was different on the 03s and the early 04s, but that's beside the point. So here's what I got. These are Dynamite Diesel 30% over brand new injectors. Open one of these bad boys up. Normally Dynamite Diesel sends you a flow sheet with them, but I don't know if they don't do that on new injectors, if that's just a reman thing or what. But I was on the struggle bus there. This is an injector for a common rail Dodge. Pull this bad boy out. Go over some basics. These are electronic solenoid injectors. So your fuel goes in here. Fuel goes in there by the connector tube. Ooh. Which we'll go over that here in a minute. And then it's a common rail system. So the fuel rail is always pressurized. There's always pressure to this point as long as the engine's running. And then this electronic solenoid, all the timing for injection and everything is controlled electronically by the computer, and that's when it tells it to go off. So this is the nozzle. The nozzles specifically are what is made to be 30% over. The 30% is the extra fuel rate. It is not 30% more horsepower. 30% over injectors on a common rail equates to roughly 90 horsepower if everything's tuned right. This is where your return fuel comes out and exits and goes back to the back of the head where it can return to the pump and be recycled. This helps for cooling and all kinds of other stuff. So, on my truck, I have a set of 30 over Dynamite Diesels in it already. I bought remans when I bought them originally. Excuse the shop, it is a wreck right now. I mean, it's been like a tornado came through here. They are 30% over Dynamite Diesels. I bought them, I think, right at 2 years ago, which is vital information for me to find out, and I'll tell you why. Because I sent them off nearly a year ago. It was about, I sent them off in May, and this is January, the end of January. So it's been right at, what would that be, 7 months ago? I sent them off, 6 or 7 months ago. I sent them off because I was having issues. Some of the symptoms of failing common rail injectors are slow to start. That's your first one. It takes longer for it to crank over and you've got good batteries, and it takes more actual revolutions to get it to turn over and you know it's spinning fast enough. Slow starts. A puff of white smoke when it does start, up until it warms up even. Sometimes it'll do it just until it warms up. Sometimes it'll do it just when you first started. It'll get that one puff of smoke. It'll be done. It's usually extra fuel that's collecting on the cylinder head, and it finally pops off and blows out the exhaust pipe when you finally get it cranked. If you're driving down the road and you hear injector knock, fuel tick, whatever you want to call it, that's a key indicator. I'm not sure the science behind what causes fuel knock, but I do know that it means failing injectors. I believe it's extra fuel on the cylinder causing it to knock. It can sound like rod knock if it gets bad enough, or it can just be like a light tick. Mine right now is a light tick. So far, 2 symptoms that I have, or technically 3, slower starts, a little puff of white smoke when I first started up. I mean, just a puff and it clears up, and then injector tick. I don't play around with injectors, I'll tell you why. I had a set of 30% over Diesel Logic injectors, and this right here is what they did. I had a 30% over Diesel Logic injector that hung up and it overfueled cylinder number 2 and shaved the top of the piston off. And I don't have the head anymore, but I did for a while. It split the valve seat on the head and split the valve seat on the head, so it ruined the head. And it took the chunk of valve that came off and shot it through the exhaust, and it blew out the bottom of my stock turbo, the original turbo on the truck, the whole set. So caused a whole lot of damage. I went in and I pulled out cylinder 2, the cylinder out of it, the piston, honed the crap out of the cylinder because I had already had it, just had it rebuilt at 20 over. So I went in and honed out the cylinder bore. Tried to get it as best I could, and called it good. The guy that rebuilt it said, I was talking back and forth to him, and he's like, I mean, if you lose just a fraction of compression, you're not going to notice it because you've got so much power already as it is. So I one-holed that cylinder and went back with a replacement 30 over diesel logic and ran that for a little while until I was having major symptoms of injector issues. I'm talking the works, all of them, all of the above. The other symptom that I don't have right now is the wait to start light will come on and it will chime while you are driving, usually at higher RPMs. So normally when you're running down the highway and you're running highway speed, that's when it does it. So I had the works on injector symptoms. I bought these 30% over dynamites, satisfied with them. A little while, I would say about a year later, I wound up having issues out of them. Called them, sent them in, they warranted them, replaced the solenoid, replaced a couple of things on them actually, and they warranted them and repaired them and sent them back. So for Black Friday this year, I got another set of 30 over injectors so I can have 2 sets because this is a work truck. I can't stand to have it down. So, and it takes a couple of weeks to send them off and get them tested, and then it takes a while to get them back. So I can't have the truck down for a month at a time because the injectors are getting tested. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these brand new ones in here, send off my other set, the set that's in it currently, have them tested and repaired if needed, and bring them back, and I'll have a set on the shelf that I can use. So, in this video, I'm going to show you the proper way to replace your injectors, because some of this stuff, if you don't follow the instructions right, you're not going to do a proper install. The injectors are not going to serve you right, and they are going to give you some of the same symptoms of failing injectors. And as we're going along, I'll point out some stuff that if you think you have injector problems, that you may go back and try and see if they fix before you go out and spend anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 on a set of injectors. And honestly, the way the market is, if you spend less than $2,000, $2,000, $2,200 on a set of injectors, you're getting trash. That's the way it is. They're cheap knockoffs. They're not going to serve you well. They're going to be bad soon and possibly ruin your engine. Keep that in mind. I like Dynamite Diesel. Some other big names are Flux. Oh shoot, I'm trying to remember other names because I just deal with Dynamites. And there's always stock Bosch if you can get actual stock Bosch and not just some Chinese knockoff that's advertised on the internet as stock Bosch. So there's a lot of stuff to look out for out there. In the meantime, let's get under the hood. I'm going to pop the hood on this baby and I'm going to show you how to do it. I recommend you watch the video all the way through before you attempt this. Maybe a little bit long. We're already at nearly 9 minutes as it is just with an intro. Really sorry about that, guys, but I like to talk and I like to give you as much information as I can. But I recommend watching the video all the way through so that you see things before you get under the hood, because a lot of guys are going to be doing this in your driveway. It may be your only vehicle and you got one shot to get this done. And you want to get it done, and then that way you can get it back on the road because you don't have another ride. So I'm going to pop the hood on here, and we're going to go over the first things that we need to get started. So, a couple of things that I like to have. They're not necessary. I just like to have them. They make things easier. For one, a good flat work surface. Lay a rag down on it. Something to keep it clean. That's about all the space you need. Another thing I like to have is some rubber gloves here and a light. Got a light set up. Another thing that is handy that you don't have to have is an engraver, and I'll tell you why. So my plan for these injectors is The injectors that are in the truck are already numbered by cylinder. I'm going to take the new injectors, I'm going to number them by cylinder. I'm going to take the connector tubes and I'm going to number them by cylinder. I'll show you the best place to do that as well. So that I can pull the injectors out that are in there, package them back up in the same boxing and everything, and take the connector tubes, label them by cylinder number. I'll show you why this is important too. That way, when I go to swap out injectors later on, I know exactly where they go. You're probably asking why it matters that you have the same connector tube with the same injector. People go both ways on connector tubes. A lot of people say replace your connector tubes anytime you replace your injectors, and some guys say, I've run the same set of connector tubes in my truck since I bought it and I've gone through 5 sets of injectors. It goes either way. It's really honestly a cat and mouse game. And it's 6 one way, half a dozen the other. The reason why this is so vital is you have your injector here with the hole for your connector tube. This connector tube fits down in there like that. The only thing that seals that off is a mechanical connection. That's all it is. It's literally this metal on this metal at the correct angle causes this to seal. So, just to be safe, I like to replace my connector tubes when I get a new set of injectors or a different set of injectors. Because these have those little balls right there on top, those little detent balls. So the injector can only go in one way. It goes in with those little balls up. So you know that if this connector tube goes with this injector, if you put it back together, they're going to mate up the same way. That's me. That's how I like to be. So I'm going to go ahead, before I even get started, I'm going to go ahead and engrave numbers on all of these injectors, and then I'm going to lay them out on my cloth here in order. That way when I'm pulling components, they're already ready to go. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to do some engraving. Alright, so I have all of them engraved. I engraved mine on the ear. That's the best place to put it. I engraved my connector tubes up close to the top where the balls are, but on the part that this is where it seals in the head, and then that's where the fuel line threads on. This is where the nut spins on right here. So it should be safe right there because the nut goes on. I also found in the very bottom of the box, underneath all of it, which I had not pulled all these out yet, I found the flow sheet. And this says, basically it says that, hey, these injectors are all balanced out evenly. Here's your number, your cylinder number right here, which you don't really have a way of knowing which one is which because they don't label them, but that tells you they're all running pretty even all the way up the pressure chain. So I also printed out the installation instructions from Dynamite Diesel's website. They have pretty in-depth instructions here for replacing the injectors. They're pretty nice. So I have this. I'm going to use this as a reference when it comes down to torquing, because torquing is very vital on these, and the torque sequence is probably the most vital on these. A few tools that you're going to need beforehand that I can tell you might not have. Most guys should, but you might not. You're going to need a 1/2-inch torque wrench. You're going to need a 1/4-inch torque wrench, or better yet, you're going to need one that does inch pounds and one that does foot pounds. Because the general gist of what we have to do to get to these injectors and get them pulled out is we have to pull the valve cover and we have to pull the rocker box that's underneath it. Not a big deal. We have to pull the intake elbow, and we'll have to unplug all of the injector banks, and we'll have to pull all of the fuel lines loose to do it. And then once we have all of that out of the way, then we will be able to get down into actually getting the injectors out. So it is currently 6:45. Say I start this at 6:30. We'll see about how long it takes to do this. Usually I can have this done in an hour, no more than, an hour and a half or 2 hours, because I've done it so many times. It's not really that hard. I already have the plastic cover off of my valve cover. I'm probably going to put that on this time. I've been tracking down these oil leaks under here that are coming from these grommets, and I think I finally got them settled down. I had one of these breather tubes was leaking really bad and actually ran me low on oil. So, beside the point. Check that while you're in here. And you can order these bolts with the grommets, and also some guys have said they found them without the grommets. You can order them online as well. I think Thoroughbred Diesel carries them. And right here on the front, it actually tells you what your firing order is. 153624. In case you wanted to know that cool bit of information, or if you forgot. So I'm going to break down into this thing. I've got all my stuff laid out over there. So the first thing is, these bolts right here hold the plastic valve cover on. These are 10 mil. And then these are also 10 mil, and you got to pull all 6 of these out. You have to pull your oil cap off to get the plastic cover off. I don't have a knob on mine anymore. Mine's just the actual cap part. So that's easy enough. But pull these 4, get your plastic valve cover off, and then pull these 6 right here. And then you're going to want to pull these tubes out. However you're going to get them out. Good luck, because sometimes they're prone to leaking again if you don't do it right. And then we'll get down underneath there and we'll get on to the next step. Alright, with the valve cover off, this is what your valve train looks like. I usually recommend doing your valve lash while you're in here doing this, because you actually have to remove the rockers to do this. At least one of them. And I'll show you how to do it with just removing one of them. A lot of shops, whenever they do valve lash or injectors, they will quote you the price, if they do it, for the valve cover gasket. That's this little rubber gasket that runs around the edge here. I've replaced it once. You can see I got a rip in it somewhere. If it'll focus. Yeah, right there in that corner. I've done it once and haven't had to do it again. And these bolts right here, they have these grommets on there to seal them off. That's a new bolt, actually, I think. They have grommets to seal that hole off, because these trucks are very common for making crankcase pressure naturally even. So that's not an uncommon thing. Now we got to pull this injector rack out. Now to do that, you have to pull the wires off of your injectors, unplug your bank connectors, because each one of these controls 2 injectors. So this is your bank. And then there's bolts here. Let's see, where are they all? I know there's a bolt there, and seems like there's a couple other mixed along. I know there's one here and one on the other end. That may actually be all of them. But these right here are 8mm. Be very gentle with these. And also remember which wire goes where. So if you do it right, you can usually pull them off and spread them out so that they stick, and then they alternate. So you have yellow and orange, brown and red. That is brown, it's covered in oil. And then you have yellow and orange, brown and red, yellow, orange, and then in the very back, brown and red. Pay attention to where they're at. You're going to need to hook those up where they were before, usually, and they all tie in. The orange goes on the same side, the red goes on the same side. It's pretty easy normally to remember it, because your orange and your red are similar, and they're on the same side, which is on the left side. But like I said, if you spread them apart, you know, just pull them apart. When you pull this this rocker box off, it's usually easier. But I'm going to get on that. I've got to grab a 8mm and start pulling these wires off, and then I'm going to pull these bank connectors out too, and I'll be ready to rock and roll. Alright, this is what it looks with the rocker box out of the way. We're getting closer. The next step is the intake horn. Obviously, as you can tell, I have a Sinister Diesel intake horn, because I was working on my truck one time and pulled the intake horn off for something and went to tighten it down, and I was tightening all 4 bolts down. I got to the last one and I gave it one more, just a little bit of a turn, and broke an ear off of it. So that one's sitting on the shelf over there, broken. So I went with a Sinister. And I also have a S&B grid heater delete right here. Super nice. I was one of those guys that was never going to delete the grid heater on my truck, and then I did, and never go back. But if you have the grid heater, you're going to have, instead of this block, it's going to be the grid heater with some wires coming off. Usually it grounds to like right here or something. If you have a stock intake horn, you're going to have 10 mil bolts on it. I lost one of my hex bolts somehow, so I had to go back to a 10 mil. That's the next step to come out. Be very gentle with these injectors. Some of these injectors, the tops spin on them, and some don't. If it spins, just do your best to hold it in place, and don't try to make the others spin. Be gentle with that. One of the things that I really don't like about injector jobs is you are right here on top of the rockers, so all the engine oil. You can do this on a hot engine. I don't recommend it. It's not very pleasant. The best thing to do is pull it up in the shop where you're going to do the work, kill it, and let it sit for a while. And a lot of this oil will drain back out of these rockers. You see it's pooled up here on the top of these rockers. If you let it sit for a while, a lot of that will drain back off. Some of this just goes with it because you got to lean up on something to get to some of these, and that's just how it's going to be. My truck's actually not that bad because I can put my knee on the cross member and put my feet on the grill guard and work on it relatively easily. So, like I said, the next step is pull the intake horn off. We're going to loosen up that. I believe that is 7/16 on that. I'm not sure. I'll let you know when I find out. And we're going to loosen this one, this clamp. We're going to take this off on the dipstick. We're going to take these 4 off, and then we're just going to turn it to the side and get it out of the way. So the rocker box, I told you there was more bolts. For some reason, I was blind and wasn't thinking. They are at the tops here. There's, what, 5 of them? 5 of these across the top and then 1 at each end. And these, I'm not 100% sure if you can buy replacement wiring harnesses or if you have to buy it already in the rocker box. But most likely, if you suspect you have a bad wiring harness, because these wires will get chafed sometimes in these little spots and it'll expose the bare wire, the easiest thing to do is just buy a rocker box. Fortunately, knock on wood, I haven't had to buy a rocker box yet because of wiring issues. Fortunately. So I'm going to pull that intake horn off. Alright, now my intake horn is out of the way. Now there's a couple of things you can do next. There's a couple of ways you can go about it. So the next logical step is to go in and pull all your connector tubes. But to do that, you have to pull the fuel lines. Now you can pull the rail all at one time. Go in and pull all of your fuel lines loose at the injectors. And then take those 3 10 mil bolts right there off the side of the fuel rail. Pull the whole rail at a time. You got to pull the stuff off the bottom, the line going to the injection pump and all that, and the line going, I think the return line goes straight back to the injection pump, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, I pull my fuel lines individually, because you might as well. They have 10 mil hold downs right here. Pull that 10 mil bolt, you can pull the hold down up, and then, I don't remember what size these are, 11/16 or 3/4 maybe. It's the same on the connector tube as it is on the rail. Very important note right here. This is a common rail system, meaning that when the injection pump is turning because the truck is cranked or cranking, remember, or cranking, this whole rail right here, all of these lines are pressurized. And they can be pressurized in excess of 20,000 PSI. More than enough to inject diesel into your skin. Keep that in mind. It's not something to play with. If you think you have a fuel leak, don't have the truck running. Go reaching your fingers around here feeling for fuel leaks, because you could get diesel under your skin. It causes major issues. Don't do that. Don't be that guy. So what I'm going to do is I like to pull my injectors individually. So I'm going to start pulling injector lines. I meant my injector lines individually. I'm going to start pulling injector lines. You break them loose here, break them loose there, pull it out. God bless Dodge, because they gave you a nice little shelf right there to work on and put all your stuff on. This one in the back, you will have to pull the 2 bolts the ones that hold that lifting ear on right there, mine are always just pretty much finger tight because I've had to do this so many times. And my lifting lug is also bent in, so it makes it a pain to get a wrench on there. Yeah, I never have straightened that out, but it's from pulling the engine, yanked it over. Because the one on the back is a pain. It's just a pain. And you have to have that out to get to everything anyway, so you're going to want to go ahead and, typically I think I pull the number 5 injector line, and then I got enough room to get to it and get that pulled off. Technically, the line 6 has an injector hold down, or a line hold down that goes on this stud back here with a nut on top. I don't ever do that. Probably should because of vibrations and stuff, but I don't. So, I'm going to get busy on that. I'm pretty sure these are 11/16 or 3/4, but I will let you know. Also, the clamp on that boot right there is 7/16 like I thought. If you don't have a set of these right here, go get a set. They are amazing. The ratchet on one end, box end on the other end, and the swivel head. They're incredible. They work great for those because of those long studs. Here is my grid heater delete block. Dadgum. This is billet, so it's CNC machine down, and it just deletes the grid heater, gives you some more airflow, and deletes the grid heater, because a lot of guys don't like the grid heater. So I'm going to get to work on that now. Honestly, that's probably one of the most painstaking parts of this entire process, is taking the injector lines off. They're all off, loose. Remember, this is your intake plate. That goes down into the intake, and there's no way to access it down there unless you pull the whole plate off. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot of extra work that I don't want to go through. So it's a good idea if you're prone to dropping things in places where they should not go. Stuff your rag down right there. Also, keep in mind that all of these holes, even the ones where the injector line hold downs go straight through that plate, and they will drop stuff down into your intake. So keep that in mind. The line on the back, you don't technically have to take that line off of the rail. The same way with the one on the front. The one and the 6, you don't technically have to take off the rail because you can just spin them around. I do. And if you know anything about Dodge 3rd gens, and you've been around them for any length of time, be leery of putting stuff on top of your windshield wipers like I do, because windshield wipers just randomly decide to come on and make a swipe in these trucks. And if you have a bunch of critical stuff laid up there and it takes a sweep, you're losing your stuff. So with that being said, I'm actually going to take this, not so much worried about the lifting hook as much as I am the bolts. And I'm going to set it over here under the windshield wiper like that. Now that that's out of the way, the next step is, by the way, the injector line, or the injector lines are 3/4 inch. You can use a line wrench on them like this. You don't have to. You can do most of them with a regular box end wrench and use the open end. Now we're on to these connector tube nuts. Now that's not really that big of a deal. They're pretty easy to get to. But you're also going to need the half-inch torque wrench on those when you go to put them back on. So it's a good idea to just go ahead and whip that bad boy out and get it ready to go. And I don't remember what size those are, so hang tight while I find what size they are, and I will let you know. Those are what you're going to need the foot-pounds of torque on, is those tube nuts right there. So keep that in mind. It's a good idea to go ahead and whip that baby out, get it ready. I would say at this point, we're pretty close to halfway there. You might say, well, we haven't even pulled the injectors yet. Yeah, but that's not really that bad. Technically, I guess the halfway point would be when we actually pull the injectors, but I say we're about halfway as we are. So hold tight. I'm going to get the size on those injector tube nuts, and I'll get back with you. Alright, so it is a 15/16 that goes on here. For the sake of time in this video, since we're already nearly at 30 minutes, and we haven't even got these injectors out, I think that I'm going to cut the video when I get the injectors out. And I'm probably going to title this one Injector Intro and Injector Removal. And then I'm going to start recording another video that's titled injector install. Otherwise, this is just going to be a ridiculously long video. Oops. And somehow, I will admit that I've lost my 15/16 half-inch socket that I had. I don't know how, but I did. So I'm probably going to have to go up to my dad's. I got to go up there anyway. And dig around and see if he has a 15/16 and a half-inch socket. But in the meantime, what you want to do on these connector nuts is go ahead and thread them out. And I always just take them. I don't worry about setting these really that much out of the way, because this is pretty much the last step here. You're going to pull that loose, and then you're going to wiggle that around until you get it to pop loose. We may have to get a pry bar. I'll show you how to do that here in a second, but I'm going to take the rest of these nuts off. So, I have this pry bar here. It was just a nail bar originally, and the end has been cut out with a really big notch, but it doesn't take much to just snap these suckers out. Be gentle on your threads. Try not to pull a thread getting it out. But if you just apply pressure at the right angle, kind of pop them, they usually come right out. Usually. Now, I cannot stress this enough. Make sure that you pull those connector tubes out enough. Because that mechanical seal in there, if you don't loosen those connector tubes up and get those suckers popped out far enough, you're not going to get the injector out and you're going to cause damage. So the next thing that we're going to do here is we have to pull the rockers. I'm going to do mine, you can do it really without, you can pull one rocker. I believe these are the exhaust rockers that are on the back. You can pull one rocker. Just loosen that up. And stack it if you're good. You can stack it to the side out of the way. Another option is set it over on your workbench, wherever you have a good place. And another thing that I cannot stress enough is keep everything together. What I have done in the past when I've had to do injectors and waited on them to come back, didn't have another set to put in immediately, is go to Walmart and get you some of these clear plastic shoe boxes right here. You can write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the lid. Stick you put you a shop towel or something in there to catch all the oil. I put an arrow on there to point which way was to the front, because I like to lay out my bolts and everything on these injectors exactly how they came out. So what you do now is you pull this rocker out right here. Alright, the rockers are off on the exhaust side. Now here's where it comes into play. Like I said, making sure that you keep everything where it goes. Watch these bridges, because a lot of the times the oil makes the rocker stick to the bridge. It'll pop it off with it. Happened to me on a couple of these. They have these little dots right here. I always line those up on the front of the engine. And if you're taking out both sets of rockers, which you can, you don't have to. I used to, I don't anymore. It's just extra work that I don't want to deal with. That's why I put an arrow on the box and I slid it under the truck and kept them facing forward so that I could keep my exhaust and my intake rockers separate. It's just the way that I am. I like to do that. These are very precise tolerances that are on these valve lashes, and I just don't like to mess with them. So every little bit that I can do to make it go back in exactly how it was, I'm going to do. And now we have to pull the injector hold down bolts. Those are 8mm as well. This is what you're going to need the 1/4 inch torque wrench on when you go to put back, when you go to reinstall, because that's inch pounds that go on these hold down bolts. And we're nearly there. I mean, I'm about to have an injector pulled out for you to see. Normally I like to do one at a time. Pull an injector, lay it on the table with all its components, pull an injector, lay it on the table, and then soon as I pull one out, stick one back in the hole where it goes. Since I don't have my 15/16 socket for whatever reason, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is pull one injector for you to see, and then I'm going to call it a night, and I'm going to pick this back up in the morning and give you all a video on how to reinstall injectors, and we'll take the second half of this down. It's been a couple of hours. I think I might have overestimated myself a little bit on how long it takes me to do this. Because it's been a couple of hours almost, and we don't have an injector out yet. But I also have to bear in mind that a lot of the times when I'm making these videos, like right now, I stop to narrate and give an update on where I'm at. So that's not always accurate. You can usually cut off quite a bit of time if you take into account how long I've actually spent doing that. Anyway, I'm going to get an 8mm and the torque wrench, and I'm going to pop that bad boy out of there. Alright, I have the hold down bolt out on the number 1. Sometimes you can wiggle them and get them to pop up and get lucky. You may want to take that bridge off before you try. Make sure you don't knock it off. That one's not wanting to come, so I'll take my pry bar again. And you get it at just the right angle and gently lift up on it. And there it goes, right there. Here is a used injector coming out. Turn it a little bit to get it past that rocker. There you are. Ooh, that is crusty. Crusty, crusty. Look at that nozzle. If it'll focus. Look at that nozzle. Alright. That hole down in there is the top of your cylinder. So I'm going to drop this back in there for safekeeping for now. And I'm going to pick this back up in the morning. This is another reason why I say lay all your stuff out exactly where it came from. It doesn't matter that much, but I mean, I am down to the bolt. I want every bolt to go back in the same hole it was in. So I laid those out. The left is the front, the right's the rear, in the order that they go in, and that's how I do all of this stuff. When you pull those rockers out too, one thing I forgot to mention, the oil that's on top of them, just pour it back into here. It'll drip down through the oil wells and stuff and wind up back in the crankcase eventually. I bet when I come out here in the morning, most of this oil will be drained back down into the crankcase in the oil pan. So that's what I'm going to call a night. That is how you remove injectors on a common rail Cummins, and that might even be, the process should be about the same for a 6.7, but that will apply for an 04.5. All the way through, I'm going to say an 07, and most likely it's going to be the same thing on an 03 and an early 04. So be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Don't hate in the comments. And also be sure to check out the next video, which is installing injectors in a common rail. And I'll try to post a link to that in the description. Y'all be good or be good at it.